Welcome to the Stanford MBA 30-Year Alumni Bridge, a podcast series where each episode brings together a different set of two people. One person from the Stanford MBA class of 1995 and one from the class of 2025. I'm Catherine Keogh McLennan, your host for these inspiring and often humorous conversations. I am also from the Stanford MBA class of 1995. This series celebrates a unique year: the class of 2025's graduation, the class of 1995's 30th reunion, and the 100th anniversary of Stanford Graduate School of Business. It's also an opportunity to connect two generations shaped by transformative eras. Our class of 1995, now in our 60s, give or take, were born just as the generation called baby boomers became the generation called X. We graduated from Stanford just as the internet arrived, marking the shift from the industrial age to the information age. The class of 2025, now in their 30s, give or take, were born just as the generation called Y, or millennials, became the generation Z, called digital natives. They are graduating from Stanford into a world where the information age is definitely giving way to an era of artificial intelligence. Will this new era become the integration age where AI sparks human creativity, or the isolation age marked by disconnection and a rising sense of purposelessness? Join us as we explore these questions, share insights, and bridge the generations. This is episode 001. Today I'm joined by Jeff Barnett from the class of 1995, a seasoned hedge fund executive, classical singer extraordinaire, and multiple award recipient for his service to Stanford over the years, and Zach Dyce from the class of 2025, an entrepreneur who intends to transform the way the American health system through Medicare can deliver addiction care through the application of AI. In this episode, we explore how the Stanford MBA experience has evolved over 30 years. Together, we also dive into the leadership, the power of soft skills, and how generational perspectives shape innovation and purpose. Jeff, do you want to start us off?
Okay, so where am I today? Well, I'm in Redwood City, California at my office. And today is an auspicious day in American democracy because it's the election today for nationally. So we have a race that apparently some people around the world care about a little bit. So that's just, it's kind of crazy. And I have to say that my wife and I are on pins and needles awaiting the outcome. But otherwise, just chugging away at my day job.
All right. But you're in Redwood City and you haven't left Palo Alto.
Yeah, I still live in Palo Alto. I'm a mile from campus and we're on campus, all the time for various things, concerts or just biking or running. My daughter does big loops around, goes up and does all through campus and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. Well, just a quick one, Jeff, then. How many kids do you have?
2 kids, one in college, one finishing up high school. And Mike Ewan's youngest is my daughter's classmate in school. It's kind of funny. Yeah.
What are their 2 names, Jeff?
My son is JT, and short for James Thomas, his grandfather's, and my daughter is Claire.
Oh, great. And what are you up to, Zach? What's going on at Stanford?
Yeah, so I'm actually in the library here at the GSB. It's a beautiful, sunny and 70-degree day in Palo Alto.
Shocking.
Shocking. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? This Florida man loves it. But it's a beautiful day. I mean, not much going on campus, at least around here. A lot of people out walking around, day off of school for the election. I think that there are some events going on in the Union and Tressiter, but other than that, I mean, not much to report. I've been in the library most of the day working on my startup, but I actually, this morning, it started going to a dear friend of mine who I knew from before the GSB, but is now a classmate, that she accepted a job at Dow Chemical. And so there was a little surprise party for her to celebrate apple cider, apples, because she's moving to New York. So it was a very, very warm day to start what is a long and stressful day for many reasons.
Yeah, long and stressful day for election day. And Zach, it's funny.
one of the memories that pops up. The purpose of this is really to kind of exchange a 30-year difference. And I'm looking at you and I'm thinking I'm about the same age, right? So, I probably could be on the campus in your class and celebrating
Come
the Dow
through.
Chemical. And interestingly enough, I was remembering, Jeff, one of the most stressful events of the second year business school was watching everybody get job offers. And I don't know, do you remember that?
And I remember, yeah, because and I didn't get an offer from my summer firm. And so that was sort of they made me an offer for a terrible job that they knew I didn't want. So it didn't really count. And so those were stressful days.
Yeah. Zach, what's one of the things I noticed about some of the students I've met prior to your years is that there's a lot of focus on building the companies or doing your venture capital. Almost every student is kind of got their own thing going. So what are you building? What's your thing?
Yeah, so I am getting in on a different part of the AI hype craze. I guess let me give you a bit of background on me before Stanford.
Yeah,
So I grew up in Orlando. I mentioned I was a Florida man, grew up, born and raised, and both my parents are addicts, actually. So that's going to come back into what I'm doing now. So grew up in a low-income household with two addict parents, and just that comes with some natural craziness that now I'm very thankful for. And even at the time, I mean, it just makes life more interesting.
I love
But
that.
I went to Florida State, decided I wanted something bigger and better. Florida State hasn't always been the Stanford of the South, so I went and created my own path. I cold emailed my way into investment banking, worked in tech banking. In 2017, 2018, I got laid off, which really means fired, during the biggest bull market, M&A market of all time, that I was just very dispassionate about banking, that I realized I was more of a type A than I initially thought, that I wasn't going to sit there and do something just because some guy told me to at 3 a.m., which looking back, 50% I was right, 50% I was an asshole. I was fighting a good fight.
They're still doing that to invest. I can't believe it.
Still
They haven't
doing
gotten
it.
Enlightened.
No, and I missed that memo that you were supposed to sit there and take it. And I have zero regrets on that. I stood up there and I stood up for myself and was like, I'm not going to do this just because. But I failed forward, ended up at BCG, liked that a lot better. Consulting, it was more in my wheelhouse, organic growth, strategy, operations, structured thinking. Got tired of that. So I moved to Kenya. I was in Nairobi.
Holy cow.
Yeah,
this is nuts.
Things were too stable for me, I guess. I wanted more chaos in my life. So I moved to Kenya, where I'd never actually been. I'd been to East Africa, but I'd never been to Nairobi. And I cold emailed my way.
Pause, because we are already noting the difference between our class and your class, because we would not just pick up and go to Kenya.
It's crazy, but not as crazy as you sound. I mean, in my friend group in Kenya, I think 4 of us came here, all American or all not Kenyan. And so there's a whole ecosystem. Yeah, to Stanford, to the GSB. There's a whole ecosystem. Like the Nairobi startup scene really figured it out, like labor arbitrage.
Goodness.
And so I moved to Kenya. So long story short, I moved to Kenya, worked at the first African unicorn, which is like the Amazon of Africa. This company called Jumia. They IPO'd on the New York Stock Exchange in 2019. I joined there in 2021 when the world was still talking about profitability coming out of COVID. So I was focused on, as chief of staff, helping the company become profitable. But then halfway through 2021, the craziness of the stock market and the growth and the zero interest rate phenomena hit. And so it was all growth. And so I actually got voluntold to launch and scale a 20-minute grocery delivery business, which is also very hype cycle-y, across 10 African countries. So I did that and had the time of my life. It was incredible. It was energetic. It was exhausting. I had no idea what to do half the time. I had to learn about logistics, warehousing, grocery delivery, food delivery, quick commerce, and I loved it. And did that for 2.5 years and had the time of my life. And from that point on, I knew that I could never work a job again. And I
Wait,
reported to the,
who's there? You could never work a job again. Okay, Jeff, let's go back to Andy as we're all entering the business school. And I'm thinking, would we have met anyone that had started up a business in Africa, much less build a grocery company across 4 countries? I'm just trying to remember if there were any.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that, the GSP has changed. I've interviewed candidates. I helped Marie Mukeni create the interview program, almost 25, 27 years ago. And I've interviewed ever since. So I've interviewed dozens and dozens, many dozens of candidates. So I've seen this transition over time where, I mean, to be blunt about it, like, most of the people who came in our class were very conventional. They came from banking and consulting and they went back to banking and consulting. And then there were oddballs like me. And that sort of gave the little extra, the special sauce to the school. And there are plenty like me. I wasn't the only one by any means.
Remind us why you were an oddball, Jeff.
Well, I was a professional musician. I worked in the music business and did some other random things and worked in politics. And I just retired last year from singing, by the way, which broke my heart. But it was time to hang it up. Yeah, my last paid gig was last year. But anyway,
Jeff,
no, it's okay.
reminder for our classmates in 2025. Jeff has a career of the most stunning classical voice.
Well, it's
can
very
we
sweet.
hear it one more time? One more time for the podcast?
Not right now. You can find me on YouTube. There are a few things out there, but anyway.
Classical voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we talking Sinatra or like?
No, like Bach and Handel and Mozart.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. But anyway, the point I was going to make is that even when I got out, like I did a conventional thing, I went to a bank too, and that's what most of us did. And nowadays, I'm not even sure the banks even interview on campus anymore. I'm not even sure it's just changed completely. Yeah. So it's really a different world. I still think that the GSB is all about, changing organizations, changing the world, or whatever the cliche is. I think that's as true as ever, but it's expressed quite differently as Zach is living proof.
So Zach, what are you finding? Let's take you back to 2023 and the entry into the business school with, you've got 4 mates that are Australian term that have come from the African initiatives. Now, what do you find when you arrive at Stanford? What do you notice about the students?
I mean, I was surprised. I mean, so I had worked at Jeffries, I'd worked at BCG, but being in an elite educational institution for the first time, I mean, it was a culture shock on it. It was like, all right, I saw you all and like working in New York, I was friends with all of you and on dates with people like you, but I never had been in this environment. And so it was different levels. It was, I mean, just the opulence of wealth and success and interesting backgrounds that it was, I mean, it was exhilarating, exhausting, and I can't think of an E word, but almost like frustrating in a way that it was like, wow, there's so much to learn. There's so much to sort through. There's so many interesting people to get to know that it was very overwhelming, but also eye-opening in the sense that it's showing just so many different perspectives, so many different, I'm not going to say different shows of like class, because I was surprised how much it did skew like towards upper middle class, that I found just very interesting that coming in, that it was, you have so many people interested in so many different topics that they're so passionate about, and that it was energizing in the sense that, okay, I'm around you, that some of you have done things that I aspire to do, or you come from industries that I aspire to learn about, that I did find it empowering and motivating for many different reasons, that I wanted to be as successful as the person next to me or attain a certain level of wealth that they came from. So it was just very, very eye-opening and fun.
We've got such an interesting perspective. For me, it was intimidating, and I thought people were really too cool for me. I don't know what you thought, Jeff, in that 19...
Well, I felt completely out of my league. But, one of the things, just like if you think of culturally, this is true now, and I think it was true then, this notion that these were doers. These were people who wanted to do things. They wanted to fix things. And, and I thought for sure I was going to go to public policy school. I had it all worked out in my mind. And the more I looked at it, I thought, that's like, I don't want to sit in a cubicle and write a paper about, economic policy or something. It just didn't, I wanted to do things, fix things, build things. And even though most of us went, at least initially, to conventional careers, the culture of sort of innovation, the culture of, for lack of a better word, sort of activity of wanting to do and fix things was very real and really energizing. There was no problem that people said, oh, we can't do that, it's too hard. I never heard that once in 2 years, not once.
Yeah, it was amazing. And one of the things I look at is it was such a weird time for us. And Zach, I'd love to get your comment because you have to remember, and Jeff can add a little bit to this, there was really no internet when we arrived. I don't even think we even had emails. And
We had email. We had
did.
email when we arrived, but but
Okay.
that was the first time I'd ever had email. Like, I didn't have it at my previous job. And like, how does this all work? It's crazy. Along those lines, I have to tell an anecdote because it's so funny.
Go.
So and this goes to the eras. So we were graduating business school and somebody, I don't know who it was, got a cell phone, and it was very early. Like, this is sort of like Gordon Gekko with a giant briefcase phone.
Yes.
And I remember saying, what a dumb idea. I don't want a cell phone. People will just call me all the time. I don't want one of those. I'm happy to report, luckily, I did not choose venture capital as my career because I would have,
Too funny.
I think, any number of people made small and large fortunes on technology that I probably did not see coming. It's just kind of crazy how it's played out.
How did you communicate without email? Like, I mean, it's insane. I mean, that's how you find out about anything. I mean, we have what we call blast, and it's a listserv. What's
Jeff? What are pigeonholes?
I don't know.
Like they're actually a huge long haul of.
Oh yeah, of course, like for mail, physical mail. Yes, I do remember that. Of course, it's like that's.
So if somebody wanted somebody to, like a big gig or something wanted to do, they literally would get copies of one piece of paper saying, hey, come to this and stuff 300. I know, Zach. The time.
I don't know how you survived.
I don't either.
It's insane. Now you just type up an email and find a funny meme because you have to put a meme at the end of the email. If you're blasting it out to everyone, it's called a blast tax because that's what our listserv is called. It's called GSB Blast, and it sends it out to everyone. And so you get, 10, 15, 20 a day.
Really?
And very, very few relate to you. I mean, maybe one's about foam, which is, I think that was an institution. Yeah. But it's like you have to put a meme at the bottom because otherwise, why am I going to read these emails? So, I don't even know if memes existed in 1993.
Gosh, no.
That's so interesting.
Okay, so foam's still on, right? So friends of
R.J. Miller.
R.J. Miller, duh.
Yeah.
Okay. Jeff, were you a regular attender at foam?
Not too often to foam, but I did go to the liquidity preference, TG. No, what is it called on Fridays?
LPF.
LPF, sorry, I want to say TJ. I went to the LPFs pretty religiously. And in fact, my wife went to the GSB. And the joke we had was that I went to more of her LPFs than she did. And she was 7 years younger. So it was kind of comical. I got to know her classmates better than she did in some ways. I was reliving my youth at that point, I guess.
So, okay. So let's think about Zach. We sort of gave a brief introduction. When we all graduated from 1995, who would have known that Netscape was going to go public that year? And actually, Zach, I noticed working for consulting that it was a boon to consulting because all of a sudden information could be just zapped, well, slowly, but at least electronically zapped across the world. And these consulting firms really leveraged that knowledge. But now you're in the AI age. What does that mean to a class like you? What does AI mean as you go out into the world? You're already using it. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
No one really knows what it means.
Yeah.
Everyone, it's very buzzwordy, but it's all the hype. In the sense of it's what everyone talks about, whether it's what they're building, the startups that they want to go work for. It's like big tech And part of it's the cycle of where we are economically and hiring, to where it's much sexier to go intern or work at an AI startup than it is to go work at Apple or Google. Or maybe it's like, if you are going to Apple or Google, it's how is it touching AI?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's a discussion that comes up and everyone feels very strongly about it. That I went to for what I'm building, I never answered that. So I'm building a patient engagement and case management solution for Medicaid populations, for people struggling with addiction, housing insecurity, instability, HIV, etc. And so I went to a dinner with the VC that invests in companies working towards social mobility. And then it was a Harvard economist turned VC. Then he asked the question was, what is AI? Like, will it actually make a difference? Or something, like trying to be thought-provoking. We spent like 45 minutes talking about it, and no one knows what they're talking about. We all have ideas, but we know that it's going to be here in some way, shape, or form. And everyone has a different view on what that form's going to look like. Or is AI being deployed effectively right now? And that's the big thing that it's trying to figure out. Is it AI that's going to be gobbled up by Salesforce, Google, Microsoft, or is this AI in figuring out where the actual applications can be used? But I mean, the VCs is if you're not putting AI in your tagline when you're talking to them, no one's going to give you money. So it's a very abstract concept right now. It's definitely hype driven, but it's not the only one. I mean, climate's very hot, very much talked about. And so it's probably like climate and AI are the two things that are most talked about on campus. And even better if you can hit the intersection of both climate and AI.
I'm so glad to hear that because, Jeff, I think you tell me, but the big difference for us, we actually suddenly had it was like a global specialization. And I actually think they also introduced the leadership specialization. I don't know. I'm trying to remember what it was called. Global economic.
And there was a year-long class. It was a multi-quarter class called Learning to Lead.
That's right.
That might be what you're thinking about. And there was
the
global initiative was just being rolled out right when we left.
Yes.
And I don't actually know what the status of that is anymore. I know that it was sort of an extension of, for a while, it was an extension of the public management program. And I think it spun out on its own. I think actually, I'm not 100% sure, but I think our very generous classmate, Jeff Skoll, helped fund a big initiative in that regard. I mean, Jeff's funded a lot of stuff over time, but I know that I'm pretty sure he's involved in that. I don't know the status of those today.
Yeah, it's and so you can see that you guys were like, yeah, multi-global, whatever. But to us, it was a big deal because we weren't able to communicate so well across the world. We certainly had international students, Jeff. I'm trying to, I'm remembering all the countries that were represented, but I have a hypothesis, Zach, that your diversity kind of blows us out of the water in terms of countries and professions. And what did you find when you arrived, Zach, with your students, your fellow students, in terms of diversity?
Yeah, I mean, there is a ton, and I have no idea what it was like 30 years ago, but I know it's a huge topic of conversation, like amongst different groups. I know that I think we have 2 or 3 students from Thailand and 1 from the Philippines, but none from Indonesia, which is like the most populous country on earth or something crazy. And I think the Indian population went up, but then the African population. There's just always this waiting going on of where are we pulling students from? Do we have enough representation? Because like kind of what you were mentioning, when information started flowing more freely, it opened up your eyes. And with how globalist, I mean, talking about the election, like how globalist we are as an economy right now, that you really need those perspectives. You need people to talk and share their experience, their thoughts about their corner of the world, because it's all intertwined. And that's something that I found to be really cool, is that in the election season, like the Brits had their election like this summer. And so there's a lot of talk about that and just different perspectives on China, because that's a hot button issue that we have Chinese classmates that give different perspectives. India, like
Fantastic.
South America, big Latin American contingency. So I find it to be really powerful and cool and very important, because if not, it gets stuck in an echo chamber that, I would say like probably 2/3 of the class, maybe a little bit less, worked in banking or consulting.
Wow.
So we can like pre-business school. And so we all kind of talk the same way and think the same way. So it's nice when you can break it up and have a classically trained singer or an international student bring a different view to really spice up the conversation and get us out of the echo chamber here in Palo Alto.
I love it. So let's zoom back and forward, Jeff. So as you look at the last 30 years, what stands out as a lesson that still sticks with you at Stanford, and maybe a lesson that you wish you had had while we were there 30 years ago?
Well, it's probably a great cliche of the GSB, but like the touchy feely class was just epic. And that the whole construct, which I'd ever heard of until I got there. And of course, this is a deeply unfair simplification of touchy feely, but the whole notion of saying, when you say that, I feel this.
Yes.
And like as a concept, it's just incredibly powerful. And I've used that so many times in my life. I use it at work, I use it at home, I use it with my wife, with my kids. There's really no one I wouldn't use it with. And recognizing that the flip side is so deeply negative when you say you're a bad person or you did, whatever. And like you put these, you give these, you attach characteristics to people in a way that disempowers them and typically makes them feel more distant, and where very often they get angry. So anyway, that was definitely the most powerful
Or
learning.
Jeff, the other one is, you made me angry.
Yeah. That was a great one. I don't really have I can't say that I have an example of where I say I learned something after and think I should have learned it at business school. I definitely learned plenty after business school, but I don't know that I could say it's not like business school let me down on some front. I feel like I got a really good education for what it was. It wasn't, it's 2 years, you can learn a certain amount and then you move on. And so I'm grateful for all that I did learn, and I don't really focus much on what I didn't, to be honest.
Yeah. Zach, what stands out as the most interesting thing you've learned so far, given that you still have a little bit more than a half a year left?
Yeah. So for me coming in, that I was a finance major in undergrad, worked in banking and consulting. So I was less interested in the hard skills, but more interested in soft skills and leadership than anything related to entrepreneurship. But I think what stood out is the importance, like kind of what you're talking about with touchy feely. I haven't taken it yet, but a lot of different ways to approach it. So I'm taking conversations in management with Irv Grossbeck right now. And
Grossbeck teaches that?
Yeah.
Interesting.
He's still kicking, doing well. And I'm learning so much. I'm not a huge fan of role plays, that I just don't find them to be that useful for me. But the way the class is set up, that there's one role play that one person does in front of the class and with the antagonist or protagonist of the case on Zoom. And I find it to be really powerful, but it's simple lessons. And I use that word simple, that's been a key takeaway, is that especially in the world today, we try to make everything so complex and over-engineer, that what is the simple route that we're trying to drive towards? Let's not over-engineer, let's make it simple. And that's something I picked up from Irv Grossbeck that I think is incredible, that it's really changed the way I view. And then the second is, you kind of mentioned it in the intro, is that everyone here has something going on. And I've learned the importance of just doing, like getting forward momentum and trying something. That it's easy to talk, but it's a whole nother thing to try. And at Stanford, there's competing methodologies or viewpoints on entrepreneurship. One is the lean methodology, which is I'm going to very systematically break down problem space and then find a need. I'm going to validate that need. I'm going to find a problem, validate the problem. Or there's scrappy prototyping. And I fall under the scrappy prototyping, which is I don't really care how, test this. Have a hypothesis, put an LOI in front of someone and ask them, will you pay for it? Yes or no. Then if they're not going to do it, it's not worth spending an hour of your time. It's not worth an hour a day or a week, and just really learning that way. And so I think combining like the message of like keep it simple. What's in the best interest of myself, of the organization, in the most simple way possible, and just trying to get things done. That it's changed my perspective so much at Stanford, and leaving here, I'm so confident in my ability now to actually be a mover and shaker to get things done because of the lessons and the space to try out and fail at these things.
What's interesting is I don't even think we had the term soft skills at that point. And the fact that Grospec is teaching conversations, I don't think we would have thought about training ourselves on conversations, but in fun. And, and Jeff, you think about the touchy-feely, they are conversations. But I don't think we actually explicitly said, let's train ourselves. And it was interesting that leadership came in just as our second year was in. So interesting. All right, let's make it a little fun. What's the most fun thing that you remember, Jeff, or the funny event that was indicative of the 2 years?
I mean, both the first year and second year shows were just epic experiences, just so funny, so much fun. And so many of our classmates who were way outside their comfort zones. I mean, doing really crazy stuff. Yes, just for our audio listeners, Kath just raised her hand. And for a few of us, it was a little less of a stretch, but for a lot of kids, it was really something. So that's an amazing experience. I remember crazy clear memories about my outdoor adventure trip, which happened before school even started. And I'm still close friends with a number of people who were on that trip, like, Dave Welling and CJ and Christian Jacobson was on that trip, and just a whole bunch of people that I'm still in touch with regularly. And it was just great memories about that, and such a wonderful start to my GSB experience.
Jeff, which one did you do? Which was
It was one of the Yosemite trips.
How could it be so good? Jeez. Zach, do you guys still have the outdoor adventure where you go before school in little crews?
No. So what has taken over is there are two main events.
Okay.
And they're all unofficial.
Yep.
One is Yacht Week, somewhere in Croatia or Greece.
Of course.
Yacht Week. Oh my God.
Yes.
That's like, don't let the Wall Street Journal get a hold of that news. That is really kind of appalling at some level, but I love it.
How many people go on that? Tell us about that. Did you go?
So I had zero desire. It's not as glamorous as it sounds. It's like 10 or 15 people sleeping in small bunks on a crappy sailboat for a week. And so everyone just gets they enjoy themselves and you enjoy yourself, and it's just a party. And so people got to know each other very well. I mean, no one really cares now that you're second year in, but first year it's people went on Yacht Week. It's a good way to know people. And then there's a big trip to Colombia.
Of course.
Probably 200 or 250 people went on. And it's just overwhelming because you're meeting so many people at once. And it's just no one really has any friends. Everyone's trying to figure out, will I have any friends? How do I fit in? And it's just chaos. And I'm glad I went. It was a good time, but it was one of the more overwhelming things I've ever done in my life.
Why Colombia, Zach? What was the choice there?
I don't know. It's been a thing, and it's just a quintessential business school trip. Every school does it.
Okay.
Harvard, Stanford, Wharton,
Really?
Columbia, everyone. And there's a company that they rip you off. I mean, they make so much money. I pay $3,000 to go for a week, and they host these dinners and whatnot. So it's become an institution, almost a rite of passage. I mean, I could have lived without going on it, but I'm glad I went, that it was a good time. But it sounds like the partying has really ratcheted up in the last 30 years in terms of preschool activity.
Well, see, that's interesting. Here's the question. I don't know, Jeff. I mean, I worked pretty hard during the 2 years, but I also, for example, was part of the ski houses in Lake Tahoe. And that was a really important part of part of my life. Jeff, what do you think about the balance of whatever is important to you versus studying?
I was not a great studier. Just Zach, for your FYI, Kath was one of our very top students. I think she was in the top 2 or 3 in the whole class. So she definitely worked really hard, and she did it quietly. I had no idea that she was as successful academically as she was. I definitely was going for the big P. I was not even forget about H. I got a few H's, but probably by luck more than anything. So I had a different approach to that. It really, what I remember was that just very dramatically, there were people who just waltzed through school and I think worked very little and played a lot of golf and drank a lot. And there are other people who were very studious and it ran the entire spectrum. And I suppose that I probably fell closer to the middle than most. So, I would go to occasional foam and I would go to the LPFs and I'd go to a party now and again. But and there are other people who I think by either lack of interest or maybe life circumstances, and we had some married parents and some who had kids. I think of Hervé, who had little kids at this time during school. And so it's not like he's going to go out partying a lot. He's got 2 little girls at home. So, I was probably in the middle in that regard, and I was comfortable there. That worked for me.
What were you doing when you weren't studying, Jeff? Were you singing?
Well, especially second year, I did a lot of singing because I was getting ready for some major concerts and stuff. But I don't know, I did a lot of sports. I mean, a lot of it is, there's just tons of jocks there. I mean, and I was a terrible athlete. I've never been good, but everyone was always doing a sport. You're always, it's mountain biking and running and trail running and people were playing frisbee football or whatever it was called at the time. But I think I remember that Minsock was, the first day we were there, I played and Minsock was mad at me because I wasn't any good. He's like, "You're not going to be good." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm not. I'm sorry. I'm terrible at this."
Really courageous.
I doesn't remember that. But anyway.
That's such a courageous thing, though. I love that. So with you guys all, Zach, doing, your own ventures, do people find time to do things that are not related to either ventures or study?
Yeah, I mean, it's good to know that it hasn't changed that much because it's the same dynamic here, is that people are here for so many different reasons, that some people use it as a 2-year break, that it's a vacation. But yeah, I mean, I would say that the second year, I found it's a lot more chill in terms of people focus, or it's more chill in the less social in different ways, that it's more like everyone's kind of figuring their life out right now. But for example, there's a Democracy Day foam party, a Darty, to where they got a dunk tank, and that there's always events going on, always partying. But yeah, I mean, there are a ton of weekend trips. People are always traveling during the week. There's foam on Tuesdays. We have beer pong for leaders on Thursdays. So there's social events going on, party buses to San Francisco.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Sure.
You're right.
Yeah, and I always admired our classmates who go up to the party and go clubbing. I was way too intimidated. I was like, stodgy Midwest boy. I couldn't imagine doing that. It just felt so exotic.
I know. It's going to San Francisco versus Columbia,
Yeah.
So, Jeff, when you look back, I mean, one of the things I called this was like a wisdom exchange. And maybe if you reflect on the 30 years, since it will be 30 years since we've graduated, what would stand out as something you'd love to tell the Stanford class as they go out next year?
I've made some of the best friends of my life during those 2 years, and they've stuck with me way more than I would have imagined even when I was there, because you think maybe they're friends of convenience because you're thrown together or whatever. And I imagine there are a few of those, and maybe some people viewed me that way too at the time, and I don't begrudge them for that. But when I look now at who I spend time with, I mean, I just literally a couple of weeks ago spent a 3-day weekend with 9 of our classmates and had a phenomenal time. And they're still among my closest friends. And I still call upon the GSB network often, one way or the other, whether it's for professional reasons or personal or some of the nonprofit boards I'm on. And I find the collegiality between and among all GSB alumni is it really is extraordinary. I mean, it's a really special thing. You can pretty much cold email anybody and you can have a realistic expectation of a response. And I don't think that's normal.
It's not normal. But Zach, as you look going forward, what do you think is going to be the most challenging in your leadership and going out into the world? What's on your head as you imagine yourself, let's see, a year from now?
I mean, that's a very loaded question. I have no idea. I mean, and that's part of the fun of it all, is that it's being here, that there are academic approaches and lessons that are helpful, but less translatable to real life scenarios. But I think that there's just a lot of uncertainty in the world as well. I mean, we talked about AI, is that we don't really know how all of this is going to unfold. That there's a number of different crises, I mean, that we're facing. I mean, like climate crisis. I mean, look at what's happening in my home state of Florida recently with all the hurricanes. I mean, the presidential election, global instability, supply chain shortages. And I think it'll just be very interesting. I mean, with Gen Z becoming a larger part of the workforce, that I am like the youngest millennial, like by a year, I think. And so I remember dial-up, I remember 9/11, so that's a big test of, are you a millennial or not? But yeah, I mean, that
Hey,
probably
you have
makes you
some
too.
classmates that don't remember any of that.
Yeah, so I turned 30 in almost 2 months, less than 2 months. So I'm chugging right along. Yeah, so I was,
You were born when we graduated.
yeah, honestly,
Was it
30 years, wow,
1990?
5. So I was
That's
born
pretty
January
special.
2nd,
Who
1995.
would have thought? I don't think we could have even imagined a student going to the business school when we were there. We were talking about the instability and the climate change, and even Florida's such a fascinating thing. And I'd love to think about the leadership mindset going out, because these are really important people in many regards. Of course, they're important. That was kind of a silly statement. But I'd love to think about, as we went out into the world, our perspective, Jeff. I don't know if we were thinking about the world as unstable. I think the internet was kind of not even a thing. And I don't recall leaving going, I'm worried about this world. What about you, Jeff? Did you?
Definitely not. I mean, I think I felt just unbridled optimism, in part coming out of this experience of seeing these, extraordinarily talented, motivated classmates and so many of them have gone on to do really important work in so many endeavors, and not just in business, but in other endeavors as well. And, we knew about climate change, like a little bit, like there's, Al Gore was out there talking about it or
Yeah.
whatever. So it was a little bit, but not anywhere. Like his famous book and movie didn't come out until the early 2000s. So it's not like that was a huge focus, even things, probably the biggest concern we would have had, at least that I would have had at the time, was maybe something geopolitical. The Berlin Wall had fallen, and Putin hadn't really risen to power. China, we were in a huge growth mode with China, thinking like they could be our next huge partner, and that would help to, to de-radicalize them from a political perspective, if that's the right, apologies to people who know better language to describe that dynamic. So I just felt unbridled optimism, and I don't feel that today the way I do. I'm very happy in my life and I feel good about what I have, but the concerns of the world are very legit in a way that, and I have to think, if I were Zach in his class, I'd feel a certain weight on my shoulders about that I think that we were, just didn't feel that burden, to be candid.
So, Zach, your class, I mean, unbridled optimism, Jeff says, if you had to describe the counterpart, what would you say of, you kind of already have, but when you talk to your friends, what do you
I
feel
think
like?
it's a different kind of unbridled optimism. And so, I mean, I was around in 1995, not conscious, but, and from what I understand, I mean, the budget was getting balanced, that there was this growth, I mean, leading into like the very beginning of the dot-com era,
And
that there was
Clinton had just started his reign, so he came in 1993. So it was an interesting
coming out of like the early like 1990, the first Gulf War. There was so much going on, from what I understand, and I think we're in a different stage now, to where you do have AI, that it is a potential gold mine, that this is like one of the biggest if not the biggest fundamental shift since the internet companies of the 2000s. And so there is opportunity out there and optimism that there's so much for us to tackle. Something I've noticed, and something that, for better or for worse, depending on how your perspectives, is that there is a bigger focus at the school on social innovation and social impact. And people view it completely different ways, is that a lot of people do want to have some sort of purpose in their life and career now. It's how do you marry the two? And we have the Center for Social Innovation here at the GSB.
You do. That's right.
They provide funding for people like me who want to start ventures, or people who want to go work in that space. And it's made its way into the class. I mean, with the Door School being climate and sustainability focused, at the university as a whole, the curriculum now focuses more on understanding our role in the world and how we can change lives, change organizations, change the world. So I do think that with that aspect, that it's almost conflicting, but it's also in the sense of, okay, there's so much optimism and opportunity out there that interest rates are going to come down, funding, money's going to be available, AI, but also some of what I was talking about, that there are questions on instability in the world, Israel, Palestine, China, Ukraine, Russia, just different aspects, and balancing those two is tough. And I mean, not to mention domestic issues, of rising income inequality, cost of living crisis, housing crisis, that there's just so much out there to where if you think about it too much, it can be sad. But I think that's the beauty of being here at the GSB, is that people are thinking about these problems deeply and critically, and are trying to dedicate their lives and careers to innovating and helping solve.
What I love about it is the combination. For example, you're doing, Zach, of the Medicare and the addiction and how that's going to work. And I don't know if the integration of those purpose, we always had purpose, Steph. Don't we were definitely, I think all leaders that come to business school is, what are we here for? What are we here to do? I don't know if we had the creativity that you guys do, because I'm not sure it was a meme in our society. So we didn't, I don't know, Jeff, what do you think about that? To be able to do something like Zach's doing, I don't know if it was, if you think about Jeff Skoll and the like of Steve Jurvetson, they were in the technology club, and I thought, oh, okay, whatever. But the creation of a new way of thinking was pretty amazing. Whereas I think these guys just have it by default. What do you think about that?
I'm not sure. I don't know that I know Zach's generation well enough to say. I think that the building blocks were the same, or maybe not the same, but certainly similar in terms of how we, in our class, prepared for and enrolled in business school, and the kinds of skills that we got out of it in a general way. Most of us came out of business school with critical thinking skills that were pretty good. We're problem solvers, etc. I think Zach's would be the same, but it does sound, by what Zach's saying, that there probably is definitely more of a direction towards that independence, that building from nothing, the entrepreneurial streak that's the strongest it's ever been at the school. And that's awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, as we wrap up, I'd love to have Zach tell Jeff and myself what you'd like us to do in society. That's a big question, so I'll give you a few minutes to think about that. But so let's see, Jeff, we're all sort of hovering around turning 60, give or take a few years. And we're all kind of coming to grips with what that means to so-called retire, but I don't know many people that are going to be playing golf. I'd love to know what you want us to do. I know that's a weird question. And then in exchange, Jeff, what would you wish upon Zach's generation? So who wants to go first? Those are hard questions.
So I think the first thing is give us your money. That you, very simply, give us your money.
Not advice, just give us the money.
I was going to get to advice, but
okay, good.
I would say I think money's really the most important aspect, and I think it's reimagining what it looks like to invest in people, processes, problems, and leveraging the experience that you've accrued over 60 years of life, let's use a round number, 30 years of post-business school experience, to leverage the learnings and the experiences of going through a number of economic cycles, for seeing the end of the world 2 or 3 times, to understanding the cyclicality of it all and helping provide that guidance to young people like myself who are experiencing some of this for the first time. And when we see the world ending, we think it's for real this time. You may think it's for real this time too, but it's helping us get through those tough times and offering advice. But also, I mean, it's something that I think it's always a fine balance, is that I understand, and I think there's a big power in naivety of being young and dumb and hungry.
Isn't
but
it wonderful?
Also having an open mind to understand some of those problems and looking at it that, yes, we are still leaders, but let's invest in the young next generation as well, of
Love it.
understanding that there are different perspectives, different, I'm going to say views, but different ways to approach problems. And I think that could really be the most rewarding next step for a lot of people in older generations. It's let me learn, like, let me adapt, like, let's take the best of my generation, but also like leverage the best of the next up and coming generation. So I would say that,
well.
that's top of mind for me.
It's brilliant. And by the way, you asked for the order, which is perfect. Like, you gotta ask for the order. I love it.
Jeff.
Well, a tiny piece of advice for our classmates, Kath, and then, and by the way, I want you to answer this question too. So get ready to give your own answer. But, there's a little book by a well-known Harvard professor, Arthur Brooks, called From Strength to Strength. And have you read it, Kath, or no?
I haven't.
Okay. It's a good book. So I recommend it. And it's about how you, in different stages of your life, you have different kind of gifts to offer. And so, and then there's some science around it. I think it's real science. It's not pseudoscience, about how the brain changes and the plasticity and things of that nature change. So like, why do Nobel laureates, like, they never do anything important after age 35? But then there's an enormous amount of wisdom as you get older. And how do you sort of transition in your life to understand how you still add value, where it is? I'm thinking a lot about that, because I find in my own job where I'm forgetting shit like that. I've forgotten more than I ever knew, I feel like. But I also legitimately recognize I'm still adding value in certain ways, in certain contexts, that only I can add based on the full sort of panoply of experiences I've had. And this is not unique to me. This is everyone in our class. Everyone has that within them. And I think that's the kind of stuff we can offer. Zach, I can't give him technical knowledge about AI. I don't know anything about that. But I might be able to say, as you think about how you build a team, here's a thought, or whatever it is. So that's just one thing. And that's for our classmates to think about, anyone who listens to this. Read that book and think about what you can still offer that's of value and maybe unique to your life situation. And then, Zach, I just say, don't quit on us. I think the world has got a lot of problems, but we need you. We need your generation. You got a lot of work to do. So get to it, because our generation isn't going to fix the problems the world faces. It's going to be yours.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to end, you guys. You're very special people, and it's such a privilege. Yeah,
you're amazing.
It's such a privilege.
Thanks for bringing this together.
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing, Zach, and I love what Jeff said. I love that. We want to help you, but man, you guys are the energy. I will read that book. So, hey, thank you guys very much. I look forward to catching up with Jeff in less than a year, and I wish you all the best, Zach, as you lead the world for us. For more insights and information, visit my website at katherinemclennan.com. That's KATHARINEMCLENNAN.com. Don't forget to subscribe to this series so you know when the next episode will be, as we continue exchanging wisdom, connecting past, present, and future through the perspectives of Stanford MBA graduates of 1995 and 2025.